about to share a true story of how my journey to Katahdin began when I was lost at the age of 10 years old back in 1977. Good morning, everybody. I am in South Central Pennsylvania, my home state, at Caledonia State Park. And right now I'm about to embark on a section of trail that I have not hiked since the age of 10 years old back in 1977. In order to begin this story, I do have to take you guys literally back in time to my younger years. And I was actually involved in my church group, which had a similar organization to the Boy Scouts, and this was kind of like within the church group. And how I came to be involved in that, I must mention a gentleman who has been a huge influence on my life, and his name is Bernie. The neighborhood that I had lived in, we'll just say that it was kind of a bit of a rough neighborhood when I was growing up. And this gentleman by the name of Bernie, he would simply come into our neighborhood in his van, and there was no candy in the van. And he would basically pull up, and he would stop in the middle of the neighborhood, and he would see us kids out playing, and he would get out and he would say, "Go tell your mothers you're coming to church with me." And we would, you know, our moms would come out, and they met Bernie, very well respected man in our hometown, and you know, off we would go to church. So try to prevent, you know, a long story from becoming even longer. They had planned a weekend for us to come up here to Caledonia State Park, and we were going to hike in on the Appalachian Trail to Quarry Gap Shelters. Many of you who have done this section of trail, I'm sure you're gonna, if you do this section, you'll never forget Quarry Gap Shelters as long as you live, because easily probably in the top 5 most well-kept shelters on the entire Appalachian Trail. So came into this area right here. I'm actually at the trailhead. So right now I have to prepare to hike, I believe it's like 2.2 miles uphill into Quarry Gap Shelter. So this weekend that was planned, as a simple overnight experience. I did have a backpack with basically a sleeping bag, some basic items and everything, and the leaders were carrying the food because of course they were preparing the food on the trail. So I'm going to share a little bit more of the story as I continue in here, but this is, I've been kind of keeping this section of trail. I don't know why. Now I do know why, because obviously I'm attempting a through hike of the entire Appalachian Trail. So I have hiked all these sections around here many times, you know, over the past few decades, but I've never walked back in here since the time that I became lost. So it kind of means a lot to me, and you know, for sentimental reasons, obviously. But this is how my journey began. So right now I got to get ready to do some climbing, and you know, I can't really talk while I'm climbing because I'm so gassed. So I'm going to share more of the story here as I head into Quarry Gap Shelters. This backpacking adventure was not only my first backpacking trip ever, this was actually going to be my very first time ever staying out in the woods. So needless to say, I was a little bit, you know, excited to come out, enjoy the experience, and with my friends who were also in this young men's church group, but also had a few fears about coming out here because of course it was, you know, the first time being out, you know, in the wild, if you will, around all the animals in the forest, you know, away from home for that backpacking experience. Now, funny, the part of the story coming into this is not long before I came out for this backpacking trip, my brother and his girlfriend at the time, who you know, turned out to be his wife, they had taken me to see the movie called Grizzly way back in the day, and it was actually a horror movie. And how I ended up there was my mom wanted to go out one evening, and you know, I was only 10, she couldn't leave me there by myself, and so she needed a babysitter. And like many times, my brother and his wife ended up watching me for the evening, but they had already had plans. And Danny and Sue said, well, we will watch him, but he's coming to the movies with us. So, you know, I was excited to go to the movies. So we get there, turned out to be a horror movie called Grizzly, about this grizzly bear that went out and like murdered everybody on earth. So as I'm coming in here for this weekend, I had those fears tucked away in the back of my mind, thinking, you know, hey, we're gonna have fun this weekend, but I may very well become, you know, dinner for the bear in this movie Grizzly. So that's kind of some of the thoughts that were on my mind coming in here, you know, as well as, you know, looking forward to getting out and having a lot of fun. Okay, everybody, taking you to the very spot that I feel I had became lost back in the day. Imagine walking down this path right here, which is pretty much an old logging road, and not understanding the blazes that are painted on the tree. Now, just to give you an idea, I think we're all familiar with a single white blaze. Now, I want you to look at my position here on the trail, and right over here where the blazes are actually painted on this tree. Now, a typical marking for the AT, you're just gonna see a single white blaze, and they're simply, you know, put along the trail along the way, and that designates that you are on the AT. Now, if you see a double white blaze like this, what this means is the trail is gonna turn. So this particular set of white blazes, oftentimes they'll just be one straight up on top of each other, and that basically means keep your eyes open that, you know, the trail is gonna change or it's coming into an intersection with some other trails. This particular one is painted properly. The upper blaze is painted offset to the left, and that means the trail is going to turn. Now, coming back to the trail here, again, imagine me coming down through here, and oftentimes now, in these days, trail maintainers will kind of leave an area grown up, but you'll see, if I had my head straight down, I would have just continued on straight, not knowing what the white blazes were, and thinking that I'm just simply going to catch up to my friends. But this is not the AT. This is some other type of a side trail, and I'm not even sure what it was, but I feel this is the very spot that I became separated from the AT and went that way for an extended duration and ended up being lost. Now, coming back a few paces, what I should have done, I should have known about the double white blaze, and I would have come into this intersection and I would have turned left. And you can see this would have been the correct way back to Caledonia State Park, the correct path being on the Appalachian Trail. Quarry Gap Shelters, everybody, mile 1087.5. This is where my journey began. Continuing on with the story, as I hike north of Quarry Gap, which is a real popular day hike destination, and number one, I was surprised there was nobody there when I arrived, and within maybe 3 minutes, a group of day hikers showed up. So continuing on with the story, we had hiked into the Quarry Gap Shelters. Now, I do want to mention that the shelters looked very, very different than they do today. I'm going to go ahead and put a photograph up on the screen that I found in a book of photographs for the AT, and the two shelters look very similar to this right here. They were two original CCC shelters that were most likely constructed back in, I'm guessing, the 30s or the 40s. We began to settle in for the evening, and we went ahead and put our bedrolls out in the shelters, and I stayed here in the left corner of the left shelter, and we got things set for dinner. And we had a good dinner together, enjoyed some time there at the campsite, and then it begins to get dark. Very, very dark. And we're all asked to settle in for the evening. We get in our sleeping bags, and I couldn't help but think, wait a minute, there's not even a door on the front of this shelter. How are we going to be protected from, you know, all the creepy crawlers and the mice and the snakes and potentially the bears? So getting comfortable in my sleeping bag, and our leaders are still up and awake having their conversation. And then I heard one say to the other, we have to get this food gathered up and put it away because of bears. So right away I'm thinking, grizzly bears? Oh my. So needless to say, I didn't sleep a wink that night, and every little sound in the woods, you know, got my attention. But I couldn't wait for daylight to come. So I make it through the night. We get up in the morning, they prepare breakfast for us, we pack everything up, and we head out of camp, heading southbound back towards Caledonia State Park, the parking area where we had begun. And there was a group that was ahead of us, and I was in the group that was behind. And for some reason, I determined the group I was in to be, you know, maybe not as cool as the group that was ahead. So I asked permission from my leader if I can hike forward and catch up to the other group. So he agrees to let me go forward, and me thinking they're just a short distance ahead of us, and they may very well have been. So at this point in the weekend, I had not been paying attention to the trail other than seeing some occasional markings on the trees. So in Bernie's defense and the leadership of my church group, they may have very well explained the blazes and what they meant. And perhaps I wasn't even paying attention if they did. Regardless, I didn't know where I was going, and I ventured off trail, and off I went into the abyss of being lost. For those of you who are familiar with this area, I must have taken every wrong turn on the face of the earth to not run into somebody in such a popular area for hiking. But I can assure you that I took every wrong turn, every wrong logging road, path, game trail known to man to try to get back to civilization. Through all of this, I ran for an extended period of time to try to catch up to the group in front of me, who obviously I never caught up to. I even sat down and waited for the group behind me to catch up, and obviously they never came because I was no longer on the AT. So off I go for hours and hours and hours, and the overwhelming fear of being lost and all of those emotions that went along with it. I'd even sat down at one point and almost given up hope. Sat down against a tree, cried my eyes out. Of course, I was still thinking of the grizzly bear from the movie Grizzly, and cried my eyes out, thought I'd never see my mom or my family again. And the strangest thing happened to me. And this is where I feel my call to the trail, my call to the wild actually happened. When I didn't have any tears left, this very strange calm swept over me. And I can remember this feeling even to this day. It was almost like the forest reached out to me and lifted me up and shook me off and said, you're going to get through this. So I continued on. And then I started to have, from that point forward, I had a much calmer head. And I remembered a few weeks earlier that our leaders had talked about what to do when you get lost. And one of those things is, if you come across a stream, if you follow the stream down off the mountain, usually it will lead to a road crossing or civilization one way or another. So I decided, I stumbled across the stream. Of course, I had water. Could stay hydrated finally after being so terrified that I had cotton mouth that I could barely pry my tongue off the roof of my mouth. So I started crashing down through the woods, through all the jaggers and everything. I'm determined that I'm going to get off the mountain and I'm going to get home. So fast forward throughout the day, starts to get dark, and I still haven't found my way out yet, but I'm sticking to the stream. And it's getting so dark that I can barely even see in front of me anymore, and I'm starting to look around to find a place where I can get my sleeping bag out and lay down for the night and get up the following morning and continue following the stream. And off in the distance I could hear some children playing, and I thought, oh my goodness, you know, I'm close to civilization. And I started to scream, you know, help me. And I come crashing down off the mountain and finally come into this path that runs behind this family home, and these kids pop out on the trail and they're like, hey, do you want to play with me? And of course I look at them and I'm like, no, I don't want to play with you. Take me to your parents. So they take me in the house. By this time it's actually dark. And I'll never forget going into the kitchen and they're like, hey, you know, we found this, you know, our friend on a trail and we're out behind the house. And I'm like, can you help me? I'm lost. And I'll never forget Mom looking at me saying, well, where are you from? And I'm like, well, I'm from Waynesboro. And I said, we were hiking the Appalachian Trail. And she's like, well, where are you supposed to be? And I said, Caledonia State Park. And I'll never forget the look on her face. She said, Caledonia? She said, do you realize how far you are away? And she agrees to take me back to Caledonia. So in the car and off we went. And as we're going down the road, she explains to me that I was almost 15 miles away from Caledonia State Park. And during that day, in my panic of running and trying to find my way out frantically, that's how far I ended up. So we come pulling into the parking lot of Caledonia, and I'll never forget it as long as I live. I go in and I see all kinds of headlights and flashlights and this big group of people that's gathered. And through it, I can see my leader, Bernie. And I'm like, oh, wow, there he is. I'll just get my ride home. So I go over and I walk up to Bernie and I say to him, I look at him and I say, Bernie, I said, what's this all about? And he turns around and he literally almost kicked my butt right on the spot. And he's like, where you been, boy? We've been looking for you all day and this is a search party and we're getting ready to come into the mountains looking for you. And there were park rangers and volunteers and I believe the state police were there. And they were all getting ready to come in the mountains looking for me. But luckily, just in time, I found my way back. And I'll never forget him saying to me, you know, I was just getting ready to call your mother and tell her that you were lost. And of course, that was back in the days of rotary phones. So that is my story of being lost on the AT and how my journey to Katahdin began. Because strangely, that day in the woods, as I feel, you know, I honestly feel the forest spoke to me. And as I got older and became a teenager and began driving, I started driving by all the trailheads in my area. And I started seeing hikers and I started to speak to hikers more. And then I got out on the trail and started enjoying some time out there. And then I started to meet through hikers and, you know, was trying to get past everybody's smell and learning everything about the AT that I could and all the wonderful people that I met along the way. And the call to Katahdin for me has just become so overpowering through the years. And it just seemed that the voice of the AT has kept calling my name louder and louder and louder. And what a wonderful day to walk back into Quarry Gap Shelters at mile, you know, walking 1,087.5 miles to make my return for the first time at the age of 53 since I was 10 years old. The shelter area looks much different now than it did back then, and it is so well cared for by some great volunteers. Innkeeper, which is actually his trail name, Raisin and Cowboy, and all the Potomac Appalachian Trail Club volunteers who do such a wonderful job maintaining our entire region here. Thank you so much for taking such good care of my old friend. And today it has a roof built between the original shelters, creating a common area with a picnic table and a porch. The area is so widely talked about and discussed over the AT. If you ask anybody who's through hike, you know, no one ever forgets Quarry Gap. The hanging baskets that are hung and cared for, the flower pots and the benches in the area, the porch swing that had been installed there so you can sit down and swing and take a break, and even a sundial has been installed there. Such a well-loved area of the AT, Quarry Gap Shelter area. So to give everybody a quick update where I'm at with my hike today, along with sharing this story from my childhood, I'm actually hiking a section from Caledonia State Park here in Pennsylvania north to Shippensburg Road. It's going to give me about 10.8 miles for the day. I'm currently still at home in my area, grabbing a few miles here and there. And the main reason I haven't continued much further north yet is I've been taking some time to see family and friends and take care of some gear issues and things of that nature. However, I'm waiting on one of my family members who unfortunately was exposed to COVID to be finished with their quarantine, and I really want to see them before I finish the second half of this epic adventure. So that's basically what I'm up to for right now. And some of my hiking friends that I've been hiking with since I returned at Sam's Gap, I've been providing some support to them along the way as well, and even a little bit of trail magic in the mix. So it really felt good to play that role again while I'm here. I don't want to consider being off trail because I'm still out and about, but kind of dragging my feet a little bit so I can see a very special person before I head north. All right, everybody, we got another snake alert here for you. Figured I'd give you a heads up since some of you don't like snakes, but actually I've run into my first venomous snake. But I'm actually here at the Birch Run Shelter, hanging out with Hands and Mouth and John Boy. Say hi, fellas.
Hello.
So I was just going down here to grab some water and ran into my first rattler, and I about did a cartwheel down through the woods. So I'm going to take you guys down here and see how close we can get. Where is it? I think it was, yeah, it was headed towards the grass here. Oh, there it is. I see the tail. All right, so right there is the rattle, and I'm going to actually attach my camera to my trekking pole. I'm not going to be stupid here. Beautiful rattler, though. All right, everyone, I'm attached to my trekking pole here. Let's see if we can give you guys a closer look without getting struck at. Where is she?
Hiker's doing silly things.
Oh, right there she is, all sprawled out. Hopefully you guys can see her right there. She's kind of... There she is.
That's a big one.
Yeah, she's pretty good size. Hopefully you guys can see her in there. And I'm not going to chase her too far. I had word earlier today from the Three Non-Blondes and company that there might have been a rattler here, me hiking up through this site. So she's not rattling. He or she's not rattling. See how close we can get here. Give you a good look. Panning across the top. All right, we're going to give her some peace here and let her do her thing. But I got to tell everybody, I stopped in and talked to these guys real quick, and I was getting ready to head down to the water source right down this path right here. And she was laying right beside it, and boy, I tell you what, he or she rattled, whatever it is, obviously a rattlesnake, and I almost fell over backwards trying to get out of the way. Did I mention before? Me no likey snakies. Oh my. I literally almost stepped right on top of that snake. And thank goodness it was a rattlesnake, because initially it did rattle at me as it crawled away. It didn't try to strike at me or anything, but I definitely threw it in reverse quickly. I'm almost to the Shippensburg Road trailhead here in this section. This is going to take me up just shy of the official halfway point, which will be across Shippensburg Road, and there's a series of markers, including the most photographed halfway point. I do want to thank everybody for walking along with me today and hearing my story of being lost on the AT and my call to the trail, my call to Katahdin. That's basically been getting louder and louder each year, and of course here I am hiking the AT. So in my next episode I will complete my hike into Pine Grove Furnace, and I will attempt to complete my half-gallon challenge, where I must consume a half-gallon of ice cream in celebration of officially making it halfway to Katahdin. And thank you so much for watching Wild on the Trail. If you haven't hit that subscribe button yet, I would greatly appreciate you hitting the subscribe button, the like button, and the notification bell so you can stay up to date on all of my videos. Take care, everyone. I will see you tomorrow.